Hi there, I'm Mário. I'm a user experience designer. I work at The Guardian, and today I'm going to talk about how to ask for attention on digital products. And one way to do it can be by just putting something on a very big font size like that, but maybe there's other ways to do it that don't require just kind of screaming at a user. And basically, I've been at The Guardian for 5 years now. I work on where I've kind of had the opportunity to work on lots of different teams, including sort of the apps, the website, on commercial, and I worked on the digital department, which has several teams, around 100 sort of people, and we work sort of fairly closely with editorial on quite a few projects. And today I'm going to speak about one particular sort of project, which is around contributions. But before that, on this idea of asking for attention, the sort of, when you think about how somebody uses a digital product, there's an intention behind why they open the app or open the website or follow the link. Like there's something they want to do and they want to achieve. But once they're there, that is also an opportunity to do something. But what happens quite frequently is that you get things like that, where you just get pop-ups all over the screen asking you to do all kinds of things, saying, you know, look, there's a disclaimer, there's some cookies, and hi, we know who you are, and welcome back, and sign up for this latest thing, and here's our newsletter. Like, it can get quite crowded and loud, and no message is really kind of getting across. So basically, I'm going to talk a bit about contributions, which are basically one-off donations. And it's a project that kind of started at The Guardian over a year ago. And where we're kind of faced with this question of sort of asking our readers to support, to kind of give money to The Guardian, but also trying to figure out the best way of sort of doing so. And try to do it in a way that we felt was a bit more considerate. So if you read The Guardian, you might have seen some of those like little appeals at the bottom of the articles that look like that, or a more prominent banner that appears sometimes. And you might have contributed, I don't know if you have supported The Guardian or not. That's okay, you can still do it at some point in the future. And I'm going to use this as sort of an example to sort of explain how we try to kind of tackle this question of how we can ask for attention and sort of some of the learnings we found along the way. And I'll be using the example of that component specifically to show you some of these learnings. And that component is called the epic, for no other reason other than it performs very well and somebody thought it was appropriate to call it the epic. I think on the actual code it's called epic, which is not a great way to do things, but anyway. So the first step on sort of this road was collecting payments. So we first build a page, perfect. Somebody can choose an amount, they can pay through PayPal, they can pay through Stripe, perfect, we can collect money. But then the next step was sort of how can we get people to this page? So, you know, how can we ask for their attention? And we've tried lots of things at the beginning, trying to kind of go to the simplest, most obvious locations at the beginning, just by having like hyperlinks on the text or on an email, just placing links in there, or sometimes even using components like this one, which was used for Soulmates and jobs adverts, and we kind of just hacked it very quickly and we made it link to this new page. So we tried all kinds of sort of ways of getting readers to this page, and they were fairly effective, but we thought we could do a bit better, and some of them felt a bit removed from the editorial content. So we had lots of people coming in, reading lots of stories, but all these links were always a bit around them. So we decided to invest a bit more in links, just sort of hyperlinks that link to this page. And we've tried and ran lots of tests and tried to place them also in different locations. And what we learned was that the links placed at the bottom of a story actually performed the best of all the links we placed. We tried placing them right at the top, on the stand first, a couple of paragraphs in, also at the bottom. And in every case, the one that's placed at the bottom of the article performed better in every single time, which sounds a bit counterintuitive. Like, would you expect the ones at the bottom to perform so well? Like, there's so few readers that would actually end up reading a story. Most readers would read the first couple of paragraphs, get a sense of the story and not finish it. But we did sort of found that that was sort of like a natural pause on their interaction with the site and with the apps, where they would sort of finish doing something, finish reading the story, and would be open to then doing something else to kind of be sort of be suggested something else that they could do. So one of our sort of first findings was that it's important to find the right moment. There's sort of different places where you can ask, and we have found a few other ones that beyond just the bottom of the articles. But up to this moment, that's still sort of our best place to ask our readers to do something else. Then the next step was, okay, we have links at the bottom of the article, they work well, but then could we, is this sort of like the right way to go about it? They're just hyperlinks. Shouldn't they be a bit more prominent and have a bit more character and brand perhaps? So we started developing sort of like little inline components that we could place at the bottom of the articles. And we thought, well, obviously, like what would work well? We know this is a good opportunity, this is a good moment, but obviously to make more people do it, we should just make them a lot louder and prominent. And instead of having like a bigger sort of descriptive sentence, we should make them like really sort of short and to the point. So we tried several components like this one, like these ones, and we sort of learned that actually the one that's less prominent performs much better than the one on the right, which again you wouldn't think so. And actually by doing some usability sessions with readers, we learned that quite a few of them just basically consider that an advert. Their attention was just gone. They finished reading the story, saw a big chunky colorful block, their attention was gone at that point. They just sort of built that behavior and realized that that was just something that was definitely not interesting to them. The conversion rate of that component, it's much closer to the one of, for example, like a standard MPU slot than of the original links we had on these pages. But the one on the left did perform quite well and quite sort of close to the links we had. So the sort of kind of second learning was that it's important to follow an existing format. If something is an article or if something is an email, like there are certain rules. There's the way you style the copy. There's sort of a cadence to that layout. And when you introduce a component that's just very jarring, very different, it can sort of generate a reaction from readers. They might just sort of notice it or just do the opposite and just reject it and assume it's something else that has nothing to do with what they were doing. So we felt that in most of the cases, trying to create components that blend in and follow the style of where we are placing them, actually it's sort of a good way to kind of get more attention and get more people to read and engage with that. Which then takes us to sort of another learning. So we found a good moment, bottom of articles. It's a great place to ask for support. A simple component is a great way to do it. But what should we say? How should we ask for financial support from our readers? What should be the appeal? And what kind of information do they value? And at this point, we were still a bit clueless about all of this. And what we've done was we kind of took on a few research tasks. We've done several rounds of research with surveys, with one-to-one interviews with readers, and readers who haven't supported and readers who had supported, who have given us money. And we found out sort of a series of motivations for supporting. Some of them were quite obvious, well, or a bit more obvious, like quality journalism perhaps. But then there were quite a few interesting ones. For example, the fact that several readers read us very frequently and they feel like that they don't give anything in return. Maybe they used to buy a newspaper in the past and now they don't. They don't get that opportunity, but they still read us every day and they rely on our journalism. So this was sort of a very interesting way to kind of see what was driving our readers to support us. But on top of that, we also realized that there was some information about The Guardian that certain readers didn't have or didn't know, which could actually make a big difference on how likely they would be to support us. So things like the financial difficulties that the media in general has, now that advertising revenues are dropping, or for example, the fact that The Guardian has a unique ownership model that's kind of free from commercial or political pressures. And those bits of information were things that were really valuable to them, but not everyone knew. And doing this research at this point helped us understand that all these things had to be part of that mix of how we approach our readers. So we had all these sort of great ideas of things that matter to them, and we had like great quotes from our readers, but we didn't really know how effective they would be at inspiring other readers to support us. So we took on the sort of the task of validating that as well. So we took that original component you saw, and we basically tested maybe sort of hundreds of different headlines, kind of testing different motivations and information and seeing how effective they were at encouraging other readers to support us. So we ran several rounds where we would swap the headline with different sort of sentences, and we would see how effective they were. And it was interesting to see what the readers were saying that was driving them to support, but also in reality what was driving other readers to support and how effective they were. Sometimes they mapped, sometimes they didn't map, but this was like a very important sort of step on this process. And the learning is that it's important to include key information, that when you ask an appeal, it might seem obvious like how you'd write it, but then there's certain bits of information that can make a big difference, and that it is important to make sure you know how effective they are and also how you should bring them together. And that takes us to another learning. So we had the moment, we had the component, we had the right information, but what was missing to kind of take us from this point onwards? Actually, that headline over there, if everyone who reads this chips in, the Guardian's future would be much more secure, was actually one of our control messages for months. We took months to be able to find something that kind of broke that in performance, and it was able to generate sort of more revenue. So we knew that we were basically a little bit stuck. We tested lots of things, and we arrived at this point where we couldn't create anything that was any better than that. So we kind of went back to our research and realized that maybe the thing we were missing out was not single bits of information, but just how you brought them together. So we basically created a component, which is the epic, which is basically like a tiny paragraph that picks up on all these bits of information and kind of blends them together and makes sort of like a coherent sort of appeal for support, kind of touching on all the key bits of information, including also like not just the motivations, but information about the Guardian that they might not know, and even going to the point of sort of emphasizing the ones that we know are more important, like for example the paywall message, which is highlighted in yellow. And all of these things added up together kind of made for a component that was radically better than other components we created before, and which kind of explains the name, why it's called the epic, because it really changed how we were performing. I think it was something along the lines of maybe 40 times better. And it just meant that by that point, we were getting so many more readers to look at and to engage with our appeals, and that made a big difference. So it's all about how you bring it together, and the epic is a case where it worked, but we've also tried to do it in different ways, kind of build the argument with different bits of information, and there's cases where it didn't work, and this is kind of a strange one where everyone thought that it would work really well to do it, but it just failed, which was to write a version that alluded to the US presidential election and to the result, the fact that Donald Trump won. And it just seems obvious. At a time like that, where you hear that type of news, you think, well, I should do something about it. I should support a news organization to cover this story and to make sure that it's well reported. But the fact was that the versions that included references to the US election result always underperformed versus a more generic pitch that made no references to the moment at all. And it was just quite interesting. And we tried to be wrong several times. We ran several rounds of sort of different pitches, maybe because we thought maybe it was the way we wrote it. But in the end, there was just no way we could beat the generic control. Which means that sometimes the way you kind of blend these pieces of information together is really important. And when you put something in, you're perhaps leaving something out that is of more value. And in the case of the election, what mattered was that we were asking for support at that moment. It didn't really matter that the appeal mentioned the result. What was important was that we were asking it at that specific moment. So that's kind of the fourth learning. It's important to make a compelling argument. The information you choose and how you present it can make a big difference. So this was meant actually to animate, and the sign up, join, hello, and cookies were meant to go away. But on the animation, on the slide now, they won't go away. But that was the intention, was that at some point, some of these learnings can be sort of ways where you can sort of help you think how you can do all these different things better. Because some of them are a necessity, things like messages around cookies or sort of identifying a user are important to do. They're necessary to how a digital product works. But there's different ways to do it, and perhaps ways that you can do it that are maybe a bit more respectful of their attention too. Now, you might say that finding the right moment or including key information, it's all like fairly obvious things. Like, of course I would find the right moment to put this little component, or of course I would include the key information. Like, I wouldn't leave it out. If it's key information, I would put it in. But the key learning is that it's very easy to sort of make assumptions about what these things are sometimes. And I hope that some of the examples that I showed kind of show that sometimes it's easy to think that you know the answer to some of these things, that something can only be sort of asked on a specific way. But actually, when you test it and when you try it out with your users, you realize that sometimes you made an assumption along the way, and that maybe there's like a different solution and a different way to go about it. So, thank you. Yes, questions? Hold it. Yes.
So I've used the guide for a long time. I've always really enjoyed the experience on it. Compared to maybe other places you've worked, what kind of, would you say the Guardian places quite a lot of value in the work that your team does compared to other organisations, or do you guys kind of fall a little lower in the pecking order?
So the question is, the user experience team, like what role we have within the organization? Yeah. So I would say for a work like this on contributions, and maybe for like the last sort of year and a half, I think it has been quite crucial. Basically, this project started by just being like a sort of like tiny team from a discovery effort on a bigger project. And it went from doing sort of nothing to then generating more than £4 million in a single year. So it has grown quite a lot, and a lot of sort of the learnings from that that kind of unpicked along the way were definitely, well, not done only by the user experience team, but definitely informed by it. We've done quite a lot of sort of live testing and qualitative and quantitative research, and that has informed it. So it's not to say that every single project and every single decision sort of passes through the user experience team. We're still quite small in the size of the Guardian, but on quite a few sort of key projects, especially particularly digital projects, we do have a word and a voice, and I think this is a good example of like of that. Yeah. Yep. Other questions?
Okay, just a quick one. Was it at all translated into print? That's the campaigning. That campaign, was it at all?
I see.
Yeah.
So the question was if it was translated into print. That campaign. Yeah. So the interesting thing is, the Guardian is a transition point where its digital platform is just much bigger than its sort of readership on the print platform. So we've done all of this without doing basically any of that on the print side of things. And we could have done it. It's just when we do it on our website and on the apps, we're working with an audience of 180 million users versus close to maybe like 300,000 on print. So we just didn't even think about that. Though at some point we'll have to get there. It's just the base we have. The base of readers we have that buy the newspaper is quite loyal, and they will perhaps continue to do it like forever. So it's not them that we have to convince. We have to convince other audiences and people who started reading us more recently, who might have maybe just found out about us on like a year or two ago, and maybe inspire them to support us. So that's our biggest challenge at the moment, is that. Yeah.
Have you seen a different behavior or a kind of different conversion between the mobile and the desktop websites?
Yeah. So the question is if there's a difference in conversion between the desktop and the mobile sites.
Did you stylize that into a different way, or you just kept?
Yep. So I think along the way we found many opportunities to branch out and to target things for a different type of reader who visits with a certain frequency, or by a reader who reads it on a specific platform, or a reader who reads more stories from a particular section. And we've done some tests to prove if that's a good idea or not. The thing is, sometimes it is, but when you only get an improvement in conversion of like 1 or 2%, it's just not worth it, because then you're branching out your appeals in two. There's the version for the people who read us on the phone, and for the people who read us on the desktop, or for the people who read environment stories. And then when you make a change, you need to make it in 3 different places. So I think we found, or we prefer to look for bigger gains where we can improve these appeals for everyone rather than for specific audiences, though at some point in time we'll have to do that as well, though at this moment we're still looking for big wins. Yeah.
If the key was to kind of keep people coming back as kind of loyal readers in the same way that you say that print would always, they'll keep buying it, was there ever a conversation about having more of a continued donation rather than just like one-off donations? And
Yep.
like not forcing, sorry, but kind of encouraging that
Yep.
kind of side of things rather than kind of showing one-off.
So your question is if we've done anything to encourage sort of repeat contributions. Yeah. So that's definitely the step we're kind of entering on now. So this project has been running for a year, and basically we know that some readers have given more than once, and now we also allow monthly contributions to be made. So you can have an amount kind of be taken every month. And I think now we're actually in the middle of a piece of research to do just that, to kind of understand why do people do these different things, and what are like the different motivations and expectations. Do I expect to get anything in return? So we're deciding to kind of tackle that, and maybe the appeals will have to kind of be a bit different. Maybe asking somebody to give again should be done in a way that is very different from somebody who has never given to us. And we know if they have done so or not, so we should be able to target them to do that. But we're just entering that phase right now. Yeah. That's great. Thank you so much.